We're here now with Professor Rick Richardson, Community and Regional Planning Program, the University of New Mexico. Professor Richardson, you have been with Community Regional Planning for many years now. You're one of the senior faculty, earned your degree in both architecture, advanced studies, as well as urban planning from MIT, and spent some time in Berkeley as well, as I recall. And you are a very proud member and very important member of our faculty in Community Regional Planning. So I'm glad we're having a chance to visit. We can maybe start with some of the classes that you teach. We know that you're the big guru in the state on and regionally and even beyond, right, in the fields of practice of negotiation and mediation and facilitation. Maybe you can start a little bit by telling us about the class that you teach in negotiation and mediation.
Thanks, Teresa. It is indeed a pleasure to be here. I actually teach 4 courses in the program. The course that I absolutely love to teach is Negotiation and Public Dispute Resolution, which I've taught.
Okay, so I kind of got the name right.
Yeah,
close enough.
Which I've taught for a number of years, and it focuses on the practice of negotiation. It focuses on how it is that we carry around a model of traditional negotiation in our head, and then we challenge the conventional wisdom through a series of exercises, role plays, and students keep a journal reflecting on their practice during the classroom. There's also a major module which we turned into a workshop this year on facilitation, and that is working with groups, neighborhood groups, community groups, your own colleagues, teamwork, and teaching the skills of facilitation and teaching the skills of working well skills and techniques of working well in a group. I teach community growth and land use planning.
Which is one of our required courses.
It's a required course for our graduate students that focuses on both the administrative, legal, and historical background of land use regulation, as well as providing the critical skills into what are the methods and techniques and emerging models for regulating land, from traditional zoning systems that are in place today to be administered and regulated to newer form-based.
So you do get into some of the form-based code discussions?
Absolutely. The discussions and exercises, and students in that class do a series of exercises. In teaching all of the classes that I teach, I believe that we learn by doing things. We learn by having a series of exercises in the class that asks that the students go out, look at a place, solve a problem, propose a solution, and come back. There's a team project in that class, as well as an independent term paper.
So let's say that again then. So they go out and they look at the problem and they really study that problem, and then part of what they do then in the class is you take them through a process of thinking about what might be some possible solutions to those problems.
That's right. That's right. And they work, and that's true in the undergraduate class that I teach, Community Planning Methods.
That's a great class.
It's also.
Our undergraduates have to take that class.
They take that in the Bachelor of Planning and Environmental Design curriculum. And students in that class are taken through exercises that introduce them to physical planning and design, community development, and natural resources and environmental planning.
So you mentioned the physical design part of that, and then in your community growth and land use, you're talking about sort of some of the regulations as it relates to the built environment. With your background in both planning and architecture, that's an interesting kind of mixture then to bring to your understanding and your framework of those issues. How do you think that gets then relayed to the students?
Well, I believe that in the physical planning and design concentration, and in taking the experience from both fields that I have, the real challenge is to allow students to become well-versed in the language and techniques of physical design, but not to become designers themselves, to know land use, to know how to do these days computer modeling and know different options, but also know how to talk, importantly, how to translate that planning and pre-design information to architects, engineers, community members, and those that will be living and working in the places that are being designed.
And so do they get into real case examples, of situations going on, for example, in this region where they have to think about what are the land use or the design issues in those situations?
Yep, absolutely. One of the delightful final team exercises in community growth and land use planning is for students to propose what an area of a neighborhood, downtown, the city of Albuquerque, an exurb, an outlying community like Placitas or Rio Rancho or Belen in the south. But what's that going to be in 50 years? And there'll be a series of assumptions that I seed the problem with and then ask them to articulate. And then both in the undergraduate class and in the graduate class to propose a solution for that. And I meet with the teams over the course of the semester, and they have a ball with it.
Yeah, I bet they come up with some interesting solutions.
Some very interesting solutions, both
utopic
as well as dystopic.
Because this is a nice thing when you're a student. You can think outside the box, think about the possibilities.
And while a lot of graduate studies is anchoring our feet in practice, anchoring our feet in what it's going to be like to work as a professional, this is a time in our lives. This is a time in the life of a student, particularly at the undergraduate level, when you can dream, when you can think about different ways to approach things, when you can think about how we can regulate in a different way, how we can build our neighborhoods in a different way, how we can compose things, how we can solve problems in a different way.
So that connection between sort of the past and how the legal basis of some of these things and how that then develops into certain kind of regulations. Do those regulations address current needs, and how might we transform the regulations to address the future needs, for example?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that actually is a nice segue into the kinds of work that I do.
Right, for your 4th Street, for example?
On North 4th Street, and in my research and community-based practice. I do a fair amount of work in the community in the region on resolving land use and environmental disputes. And what made me think of the North 4th Street project was coming up through a year-long process of negotiating with a team of 6 negotiators representing merchants and property owners on the corridor, and a team of 6 negotiators representing neighborhoods and neighborhood coalitions. Over the course of the year, reinventing a way of regulating land use, anchored in a form-based code that preserved existing property rights, yet triggered new regulations with a set of mechanisms like changing the total number of square feet to a building, rebuilding on a vacant lot, but not reusing an existing building, because we want to encourage the reuse of existing buildings. But those triggers were invented by the merchants themselves.
Oh, and that was part of the process that you facilitated, was to draw that out of them.
My co-planner and facilitator and I led the process with 9 months of intensive negotiations, Saturdays devoted to negotiating sessions, and Tuesday or Wednesday evenings devoted to educational sessions, where the participants learned different kinds of regulating, learned different ways to treat the streetscape and pedestrian ways, and really over time learned to speak the same language. One of the big problems was people were accusing one side or the other of being in favor or not favoring something which they both didn't understand completely.
So the part of the process you took them through was figuring out where the common ground was, for example.
Figuring out both where the common ground was and where they truly had disagreements.
And then work them through a process of coming to agreement, or?
Coming to agreement on some things and being very pragmatic. There were some things like the cross-section of the street that in the end they had differences of opinion. They each submitted a three-dimensional cross-section. Each wrote specifications for that. They were surprisingly similar. And they both said, we're not going to agree, but what we will do is allow the regulators and the regulatory apparatus, the Planning Commission, the EPC, and the City Council, and the redevelopment department, you decide. That's your role.
There was a lot of trust had built up for them to get to that point.
Huge amount of trust and good working relationships over time, which to this day supported the passage of a rewritten plan unanimously through the City Council and are affecting property decisions as they come up to this day. So there is an understanding and support for one another where there used to be misunderstanding and mistrust.
How do you build that trust?
I think it had a lot to do with two things. One is working together to learn about the problem. The second is making decisions, sometimes seemingly, let's put a boundary around the study area. That would be easy to do. But not when it affects what people own, the property they own, the regulations that are going to come into play.
People get very, very concerned about their private property rights.
And using new and emerging technology like Google Earth. Can we change that one? Using emerging technology like Google Earth to sit in a room and together fly over the corridor and decide jointly where the boundaries should be and which properties should be taken into consideration, and then going out together and walking and talking about what it is that they see and what are the conditions. In traditional planning processes, we're often not given the opportunity, and citizens aren't. And so that kind of mistrust and miscommunication lead to people just digging in their heels, which had happened at this, and opposing any change. And that had happened in this case.
So part of what you had to do is come in and turn that around and establish some trust. You know, one of the things I'm struck by is that when I think about two of the major classes that you teach, the practice of negotiation and dispute resolution, and then the community growth and land use. This project is a nice intersection between those expertise that you have, and I think it really points to the kinds of connections that many of us in the faculty have between the work that we do in our community, and our professional practice work, and how that intersects then with what we do even in the classroom, and then provides us a basis to really give some very concrete, focused examples and some techniques and technologies about how to work through some of these issues. Sounds like you've really consciously made those connections.
Absolutely. One of the wonderful things about the field of planning and working in planning education is that it's broad and it commands both practice as well as theory and research. Personally, I believe in being able to practice what I teach and drawing on the kind of work that I do in the community, in the city, in the region, and bringing that to the classroom by way of cases, by way of being able to ask students to analyze certain things, and by way of being able to take students from the classroom to observe and at times help in community meetings or community-based problems that we work on. I think that's a a practice, that's a principle that runs through the program, and one that I know that I value very much, and I believe that we all do.
It's sort of a hallmark of our community-based practice approach.
It is.
Would you agree?
It is.
So in the, when you're working with those undergraduates, you're building their capacity to begin to really take on some of these difficult approaches, complex approaches. You have them doing research, and you have them doing mapping, and what are some of the things that they get involved in?
Well, there are four or five key exercises. One is in learning how to communicate with designers, learning how to prepare and reflect a map that is based on how people, citizens, perceive their neighborhoods and their environments. The second is being able to go out and look at the environment and say, well, what is good and what is bad? And in this case, students and teams go to Nob Hill. And they look for public and civic spaces, and they say, well, what is good and what is bad here, and why? And they come back to class and make a presentation on that. We'll then scale that up to the university.
So it gets them thinking about being aware of their own surroundings.
Aware of their own surroundings and how much their surroundings affect whether a place is nice or whether it's uncomfortable, particularly from a neighborhood or a pedestrian point of view. We'll also look at natural systems, and I send them out to both the North Valley and the University Heights neighborhood to look at the ways that landscape, the ways that street patterns, the ways that natural systems, waterways, irrigation, and connections are reflected in the natural, those physical connections are reflected by the natural systems that support them. And in what ways we change those, and in what ways do we honor those. And most importantly for this module on environmental planning, what ways can we do better to create more sustainable places is the key question.
And so you're probably bringing some of the, your community growth and land use aspects, even in thinking about some of those issues?
The two courses reflect one another to the degree to which both have to have an understanding of the legal basis for working with land rights, and also I want to impart and do impart a way of, so how does the government, how does the municipality, the city or the county administer these land rights? In the third module, community development, which I often have you come in and give lectures about community development strategies, and this really focuses on how do we involve citizens in the practice of planning. And again, in the land use class and in the undergraduate class, there's a conventional way that citizen involvement occurs. And then I present and bring guests in, people like yourself who say, but wait a minute, aren't there other ways to think about how citizens should be involved and what should be the outcomes of that? And talk about their own work, their own practice in engendering citizen participation.
You know, as I think about some of the issues we're facing in the world today and think about our future, it seems increasingly that citizen involvement and the capacity of citizens to be involved in the shaping of their places is increasingly important. It always has been, but...
Well, I think that in the field of planning, in the field of community development, in our cities and towns, in being good citizens, the question of how should and why should and how often and how much should citizens be involved, the citizen participation goes in waves. And I think it's going through another cycle, a resurgence of, which it did back in the 1960s during the model cities era, but it's going through another resurgence of people being concerned with what it's called today, civic life. People being concerned very concerned with the future of their neighborhoods and with the you know, the emerging economy and their ability to participate in that. It's a time of slow development and slow land use change, but it's a time when people are more and more asking questions about, so when the economy picks up, what is it going to be like? And what is at stake here?
So planning and planning educators have a role in this.
A huge role.
Yeah.
It's pivotal. One of the principles that I think that all planners need to know about and all educators should be sensitive to, if not outright teach in the way that we do, this participatory method, citizen participation, and what community values need to be reflected in the planning processes, however technical, however complex, however populated with growing numbers of people and regulators and politicians and economic and property developers. It doesn't mean that citizens get left out or told what is going to happen. It is more and more important, and citizens demand it, more and more important that they're included. Or the proposals and changes aren't going to be effective.
Right. Or they'll even be opposed.
Like we learned in forestry, like we learned with the endangered species, the lesser prairie chicken out of eastern New Mexico.
Well, you have taken on some tough dispute resolutions and masterfully gotten various groups with different interests to wade through that one. One of the things I'm really struck by in your work and in our colleagues' work is the connection between perhaps what might seem like a regional focus, but its general applicability beyond this region to larger issues, whether it's the tools and the techniques themselves, or whether it's the scale at which those issues are really get played out in different arenas. There's a lot of application, I think, of all the work that you're doing.
Well, it isn't just. Thank you, and I appreciate the work that I do, and it's not just that. I think it's the work that the program does. I think it's the work that just about all of us on the faculty do. Albuquerque and the region provide extraordinary opportunities for us to be good stewards of the environment, for us to be, as educators, those that engage communities, undergraduate students and graduate students, and work on legitimately solving problems. We have an area that is incredibly accessible. We have a region that has a host of environmental, economic development, and physical planning challenges. And we have people on our faculty who grew up here, people on our faculty who've been here a long time, people on our faculty who have really built their reputations on working not, what do I want to say, working with neighborhoods, working with communities, working with distressed areas, and not using them as a laboratory and proposing things for them.
Well, one of the projects that I had the pleasure of working on with yourself and Claudia Isaac, Professor Isaac, was the work in what was then called the Pocket of Poverty area. And that was back in the early 90s. But that was a marvelous project. I learned so much from both of you working on that. But that was one of those cases that might have had the neighborhoods against each other, but instead we took them through a process of coming together to think about doing a strategic plan and thinking about how did they want this UDAG repayment money to be spent, and establishing the criteria to do that. You carried on that project too beyond the time that we worked on it.
Well, that was, it was many years ago. We were all fairly new on the faculty at the time, and the neighborhoods came to the school. There was the opportunity to reinvest $10 million in historic neighborhoods that there's about 12 or 13 of them that surround downtown. The federal government had loaned money to build a garage for a hotel, and this money had to be reinvested. The neighborhood leaders got together and said, we know how to fight over resources like this. We've been at it a long time. What we don't know, and what we'd like to do, is to be able to collaborate, come together on a plan, a strategic plan, as you said. And so you and I and Claudia Isaac facilitated the first neighborhood summit meeting, which led to, of all the neighborhoods in the area, which led to the preparation of a strategic plan, which led to principles to guide and influence the distribution of the money, which was effective for many years. When when the Albuquerque downtown was undergoing a new plan for redevelopment, the neighborhoods came together, and Claudia and I worked with them again to say what will be the impact of the plan to redevelop downtown on the neighborhoods, and what are the things that we support and what are the things that we would ask that be revised and changed in the plan. They had been treated like everybody else. Well, they'd been put to the side during the planning process, and they were outside the boundaries of the downtown, but were going to be the recipients
directly affected by what happened.
Directly affected by the development, the traffic, the different proposals that were in the downtown revitalization plan. So I think that was at a time when you were serving in a political capacity with the county yourself.
Well, and I think our relationship with the downtown neighborhoods, I think is an example of one of those sustained set of relationships where we've continued to have relations with all the various neighborhood organizations, and even since then, community development corporations and land trusts and so on that have formed. You've sat on boards as well.
I was on the board of the Sawmill Community Land Trust for 15 years. I helped form the land trust from the Community Development Corporation that it was, and was asked to serve on the board. But you know, last year we as a program celebrated 30 years of our 30th anniversary, and we had a day to honor community members, leaders, partners, friends of the program, and it was incredibly rewarding to have many of those leaders from the pocket of poverty, some of those leaders in different positions today, come and talk about what it meant to work with the program, how it is that the program and students and faculty have affected the places that they live over the years. And so that's rewarding. That's what makes working here, I think that's what makes studying here a tremendous experience. One that you don't find at many other schools, a lot of other schools.
Yes, we do enjoy our work. Absolutely. But before we let students get out of our master's program, they must complete their professional project and or their thesis, right? Or their thesis. So we offer a seminar that helps students design and start that data collection process, helps them establish their relationship with their committee. You teach that course, professional project and thesis seminar. I
teach, we call it the preparation class for professional project and thesis. And it leads students, it's a 2-credit required course to lead students through preparing a prospectus, identifying a topic, defining their approach to solving that planning problem, or in the case of a professional project, or their contribution to the way we think or analyze a project in a planning problem in the case of a thesis. But what are the methods that we'll use? What are the quantitative and qualitative approaches? Knowing what the literature is, knowing what others have said and contributed to the field, and then saying at the outset what are expected for the outcomes. And then the package will provide a descriptive outline. It will result in being able to form a committee of faculty and or community members to work with the student to guide their research and formalize that project. Over the years, the project or the thesis, over the years, we have come to conclude that this is a critical way of supporting students, of providing them with the support and with the academic and practical experience that we all have for them to do the final piece of their work, which is the project or thesis.
And then they defend in this wonderful moment when they can present their work and have their committee ask them the questions that not only reflect what they've done, but how they think about this beyond that moment. And then we send them off to be professional planners.
And many of them are. We've educated many of the students in the city. I should say many of our students are professionals or heading up key agencies in the city and the county, Santa Fe, state and federal government. And they work in, as you suggested before, this is a wonderful place to learn about being a planning professional, whether that's in a government, consulting, or nonprofit world, because many of our students go to other regions, they go to other countries, they work internationally to do their practice.
Fantastic. Any final thoughts on community regional planning as one of our senior faculty?
It's just been a joy to help build and work with the planning program over the years. I have been here since the mid-1980s and have taken great pleasure in seeing the success of our students.
And the success of your fellow colleagues. You've been a great supporter and mentor of your colleagues as well.
Yeah.
Very much appreciated.
Likewise. Thank you.
Professor James R. Richardson, fondly known as Rick Richardson, Community Regional Planning, University of New Mexico.